This is Greenland, the largest island in the world, one that for many decades was mostly overlooked. At first glance, it seems insignificant, remote, and frozen, territory belonging to Denmark. But ever since Donald Trump became president, something unexpected has started happening around Greenland. He became almost obsessed with the idea of acquiring it and even spoke publicly about the United States simply buying it outright. Those efforts were not very successful at the time. This time, however, the situation looks completely different. Just a few years ago, the idea that the United States might seize territory from an ally in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization by force would have been unthinkable. But after the United States carried out a military intervention in Venezuela, detained its president, and faced little more than diplomatic outrage, it became clear that the old rules no longer really apply. And Donald Trump is clearly intoxicated by the idea of expanding American influence. If he decided to take the island by force, it does not look like anyone would be able to stop him. And this possibility becomes more likely with every passing day. Trump himself stated that the United States needs Greenland and even joked about plans to make Greenland great again. But the real reasons behind his obsession are far more down to earth. Greenland's location is absolutely unique. It lies almost exactly between North America and Europe, and at the same time sits close to some of the most strategically important seas in the world. But the United States already has military bases on the island, and if it wanted more, it would most likely be enough to ask Denmark and receive permission. Trump's interest comes from something else entirely. Beneath Greenland's icy surface lies enormous wealth in the form of rare minerals and possibly some of the largest oil reserves on the planet. The estimated value of these resources exceeds $4 trillion, which is roughly equal to 1/5 of all historical production of the United States. It is precisely this geographic, military, and economic potential that has turned this frozen island into one of the most important geopolitical points of the past decade. And it is not only the United States that is noticed. Russia and China have as well. In recent years, their presence in the Arctic has grown rapidly. Both countries have invested billions of dollars into the region, from projects like the Arctic Silk Road to efforts to gain control of key infrastructure directly in Greenland. As the threat grows, the United States is becoming increasingly desperate and, at the same time, less predictable. This raises a crucial question. What is it about Greenland that is so valuable that the United States is willing to risk so much? And why is it prepared to go so far to obtain it? To understand this, we need to go back in time. Believe it or not, this is not the first time the United States has tried to buy Greenland. Greenland does belong to Denmark, but during the Second World War, Denmark was invaded by Nazi Germany. Suddenly, both the island and the United States itself found themselves under threat. Plans to purchase Greenland and Iceland already existed, but it was at that moment that the United States truly entered the region. It gained the right to protect the island from non-American powers, and even to establish radio stations and military bases there. When the war ended, the idea of having a strong position in Greenland appealed to the United States. It offered Denmark $100 million in gold, which today would equal roughly $1.6 billion. To its surprise, the answer was no. Instead, the United States was allowed to maintain a military presence and continue protecting the island from a new threat, the Soviet Union. And so, in the year 1953, an air base was established in northern Greenland with approximately 10,000 American soldiers. But that was not the end of it. Over time, a number of other bases were built across the island, turning Greenland into the northernmost outpost of the United States military. The reason is clear. Due to the curvature of the Earth, some of these locations were only about 3,000 miles from Moscow. They played a key role in defense and radar systems against the Soviet Union, and also served as ideal sites for high-altitude reconnaissance flights over enemy territory. It seemed that the United States would continue expanding its presence on the island. But then the Cold War ended, and during the 1990s, American interest gradually faded. Equipment was abandoned, and entire settlements were sold for as little as $1. It looked like this sparsely populated island would once again fade into obscurity. But that changed. After surveying Greenland's coastal waters, American geologists made a massive discovery. As early as the year 2008, they estimated that Greenland could hide more than 52 billion barrels of oil. For comparison, in the year 2023, the United States had proven reserves of 47 billion barrels. If these estimates are correct, Greenland could practically double American oil reserves. And even if the calculations are wrong, the value of these resources remains enormous. Oil is black gold that powers the entire world. It sits at the center of almost every aspect of daily life, from transportation to manufacturing and many other critical activities. But most of the world's oil production is controlled by just a few major players who do not always share the same interests as the United States. Since the second decade of this century, American oil production has therefore risen sharply in an effort to strengthen national security. It is estimated that the Arctic contains around 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its natural gas, along with a wide range of other resources. It is no surprise that Arctic states, including the United States, are increasingly eager to tap into these resources, support economic growth, generate revenue, and protect their economic interests. The retreat of sea ice and the melting of glaciers are making these resources more accessible, and Greenland represents the ideal place to take advantage of this situation. But here we run into a fundamental problem. Greenland itself does not want to extract oil. In July of the year 2021, the local government banned all new exploration for oil and natural gas. The main reasons cited were environmental concerns and the extremely high costs of extraction. According to their statements, the price of obtaining oil is simply too high. But if there is one thing we know about Donald Trump, it is that he does not have much faith in climate change. He has often called it a hoax and promoted slogans like drill, drill, drill. It is therefore clear that the value of Greenland for him goes far beyond its strategic location. Whether you believe it or not, ice levels in the Arctic have been declining for a long time, and this is fundamentally changing how we view the region. Most of our planet is covered by water, but for many years that was not the case here near Greenland. This ocean was almost permanently frozen and inaccessible to shipping, except under very specific and rare conditions. But as the amount of carbon in the atmosphere increases, more and more heat is trapped on Earth. The planet warms by just a few degrees, but that is enough to trigger dramatic changes. Every year there is less ice. The Arctic Ocean is also warming roughly 4 times faster than the rest of the world, completely rewriting the rules of the geopolitical game. Melting ice is revealing new sea routes, such as the Northwest Passage. These Arctic routes are significantly shorter than traditional routes that pass through places like the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal. And right in the middle of most of these routes lies Greenland, perfectly positioned to benefit from this shift. For example, a journey from Asia to Europe through the Arctic could shorten global shipping times by entire weeks. Savings in both time and fuel could fundamentally reshape global trade and shift economic power toward countries that control the seas. And whoever controls the seas controls global supply chains, with approximately 80% of all goods transported by sea. In just the past 10 years, the number of ships passing through the Arctic has increased by 30%, and this number will continue to grow. But for the United States, there is one major catch. It is not the only player pulling the strings in the Arctic, and this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump called Greenland key to the future security of the United States. In recent years, Russia has rapidly militarized its Arctic region and built dozens of military bases along its northern coast. It even went so far as to place its flag beneath the North Pole to symbolically assert its claims to Arctic territory. And China, a country located far from the Arctic, has not stayed on the sidelines either. It has significantly strengthened its presence in the region and invested billions of dollars directly in Greenland. Even before Trump began making his aggressive statements, the United States responded to the situation. In the year 2020, it reopened the American consulate in Nuuk for the first time since the year 1953 and committed to investing $4 billion into modernizing the Thule Air Base. This money went toward projects such as repairing runways and improving local transportation. For Donald Trump and his second presidential term, the national security of the United States appears to be one of the main priorities. Or perhaps even more important is defining the American sphere of influence. He has spoken about Canada potentially becoming part of the United States, mentioned the Panama Canal, and even suggested renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the American Gulf. But his obsession with Greenland felt far more concrete because it appeared during both of his presidential terms. This leads to a fundamental question. How could he actually acquire it, and how much would it cost? The strategic importance of Greenland is undeniable, and the value of its territory is enormous. But Trump's plan has a major weakness. The island currently belongs to Denmark, and Denmark has repeatedly stated that it is not for sale. On the contrary, it recently invested an additional $1.5 billion into strengthening the island's defenses. For most presidents, that alone would have marked the end of any thoughts about acquiring it. A military attack on another member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was long considered an absolute red line. In today's world, however, that certainty is beginning to fade. Even the White House press secretary did not rule out any option and stated that all possibilities remain on the table. The truth is that if the United States decided on an open invasion and seized the territory by force, it would probably be impossible for anyone to stop it. Even so, it is far more likely that this is a negotiating tactic, an attempt to push Denmark to the negotiating table rather than a genuine plan for war. But even if Denmark were willing to sell Greenland, another question arises: how do you even determine its price? Cases where states sell territory to one another in the modern era are extremely rare. There is, however, at least one partially comparable example. In the year 2017, Egypt transferred sovereignty over the islands of Tiran and Sanafir to Saudi Arabia in exchange for an aid package worth $22 billion. Putting an exact value on Greenland is like guessing the length of a piece of string. Some estimates place it around $2 trillion, which is an enormous sum even for the United States, especially for an incoming administration that wants to reduce national debt while also cutting taxes. Although Greenland is technically self-governing, both Denmark and the Greenlandic people understand that if the United States shows serious interest, the options for resistance are limited. Already 50 years ago, Greenland's fate was closely tied to American power. Since the year 2009, the island has also had the official right to become fully independent if it chooses to do so. This could become the path to persuading the people of Greenland to join the United States voluntarily, rather than under economic or military pressure. While during Trump's first term, many people saw his statements about Greenland as just another outburst or tweet, this time they seem to carry real weight. And even if the United States never buys Greenland, one thing is certain: as the ice continues to melt, its value and its importance on the global geopolitical stage will only continue to grow.